The sky over Avalon City looked different that night. It shone with long, bright lines of violet light that moved slowly across the dark clouds. Many people stopped what they were doing and pointed at the sky. They had never seen such light before. Some thought it was only a strange storm, but others whispered that it was a sign that something new was about to begin. Far away from the crowds, a young man named Ethan Cole stood on the balcony of a tall building. He worked as an engineer at the research station outside the city. Every day he dealt with numbers, tools, and machines. But that night, none of those things could hold his attention. The glowing sky drew him like a song he did not understand. It made him feel both small and full of wonder at the same time. Ethan had always been curious about how the world worked. He came from a humble family who had taught him the value of kindness and curiosity. As a child, he built small flying models made from scrap metal. As an adult, he helped design real ships that could travel beyond the edge of the known lands. Yet even with all his learning, he could not explain what he saw in the sky that night. The light seemed alive, almost as if it were calling out to someone. In another part of the kingdom, in the great city of Aranthea, a queen named Liana stood by her window in the royal palace. She saw the same violet glow filling the heavens. Her kingdom was old and full of traditions. For generations, her people had built their power from wisdom, patience, and craft. Liana had spent her life keeping her country strong and peaceful. But tonight, she too felt that something unseen was stirring. The palace halls were quiet, except for the sound of the wind outside. Liana turned from the window and walked toward her desk. There were scrolls and letters waiting for her attention, yet she could not bring herself to read any of them. Her thoughts drifted far beyond the walls of her palace. She felt a strange warmth spread across her heart, the same kind of soft pressure one feels when destiny is near. Back in Avalon, Ethan's communicator kept buzzing with alerts from the lab. His team had picked up strange magnetic readings from the upper atmosphere. The machines were showing numbers that went far beyond normal levels. An older scientist on his team, Mr. Lawson, called him through the device and said, "Ethan, you need to come here right now. Something big is happening." Within minutes, Ethan reached the control room where screens filled the walls with lines and flashes. The readings showed waves of energy moving toward the remote mountains that marked the borderlands outside both kingdoms. Nobody had ever seen such patterns before. It seemed as if the earth and the sky were speaking to each other through light. "What could it be?" one of the workers asked. "I don't know," Ethan said quietly, staring at the screen. "But I think something is opening out there. We should check the area before the storm spreads." Liana in her palace had also called her oldest advisor, Lady Mirren. "Do you feel that change?" the queen asked in a low voice. The wise woman bowed her head. "Yes, my queen. The air itself feels different. Some say the heart of the world is waking again." Liana walked back to her window and looked at the sky's strange colors. Her mind was calm, but her heart raced as if it already knew what was coming. She had always believed that every person carried a thread that connected them to another soul, somewhere, somehow. Maybe tonight, she thought, that thread would lead her to its other end. While the scientists prepared their vehicles, Ethan packed his gear. He had no idea that somewhere beyond the mountains, a queen was looking at the same sky. The distance between them was great, but the light above was the same for both. The next morning, before dawn, Ethan boarded a small aircraft for an early flight to the outer zone. As he climbed higher, the last of the violet glow faded into gold. For a moment, he thought the strange event was over. But then, deep in his chest, he felt a quiet pull, an invisible path drawing him toward the mountains. In her palace, Queen Liana received a message that the watchers on the border had seen the same lights hovering above the ancient stones of the valley. With calm resolve, she ordered her guards to prepare her carriage. She wanted to see for herself what the heavens were trying to say. Neither the young engineer nor the queen knew that their journeys were set on the same road. Two people from different worlds, one led by science and one by duty, were about to meet for the first time, under skies that had changed forever. And so, the story began quietly, like a heartbeat just starting to awaken. Ethan's aircraft flew low over the mountain line as morning light touched the peaks. Mist moved between the stones like soft rivers in the sky. The air felt quiet and proud, as if these mountains knew they were older than memory. Ethan's hands rested steady on the steering bar, but his heart was restless. The strange light from last night had faded, yet a faint glow still shimmered near the valley below.
Ow.
The reading on his meter blinked in bright red. He spoke into his radio. "Control, I am reaching the border ridge. The signal leads deeper into the ruins. I'm going to set down for a closer look." The call went silent as his craft dropped into the clouds. When the aircraft touched the ground, dust swirled around him. The field was empty. Broken stones and tall grass stretched in all directions. Old statues of forgotten kings lay half-buried. The place felt watchful, like it held tales no one had told for many years. Ethan stepped out, scanning with his small device. He followed the blinking light that guided him toward the heart of the ruins. Far on the other side of the same valley, Queen Liana and her guards rode along a narrow path. She wore a simple cloak over her blue gown so the soldiers would not draw attention. The carriage wheels rolled slowly on the rough trail. The valley air was colder here, making her breath turn to fog. Liana's hand rested on the side of the carriage as she watched the clouds shift and fold. Captain Rowan, her lead guard, pointed ahead. "Your Majesty, we are nearing the old temple ruins. That is where the strange light came from." Liana nodded. She had dreamed of this place when she was a child, though she had never been here. It was said that the ground in this valley held a gate between the seen and the unseen. Many in her court thought those were only tales for children, but she felt a deep truth hiding in them. Ethan climbed through a broken archway where vines wrapped around stone pillars. The soft hum of energy grew louder, placed his hand on the wall, and it buzzed faintly. The meter he carried lit up so bright that he had to blink. Suddenly, a sound reached him, a call of horses, the rhythm of many hoofbeats echoing down the slope. He turned quickly, expecting his own research team, but what he saw made him freeze. A group of riders in shining armor appeared from the fog. At their center was a woman who did not look like a warrior. She sat tall and calm on a white horse, her long dark hair tied loosely, her eyes bright in the pale light. The soldiers halted, forming a circle. One of them shouted, "Identify yourself, stranger." Ethan raised his hands slowly, hoping to show no harm. "My name is Ethan Cole. I come from Avalon City. A ship crashed near here. No trouble." Liana sensed fear in his tone, but also honesty. She dismounted and stepped forward. Her voice was soft yet firm. "We're far from your city, traveler. Why do you walk among our old stones?" "I came to study the strange lights," Ethan answered. "The readings led me here." Her brow lifted slightly. Few in her land knew how to measure such things. She looked at his small device, the gentle glow on its screen. It reminded her of the pulse she had felt in the sky the night before. Some of her guards moved forward, ready to seize him, but she raised her hand. "Hold," she said. Then to Ethan, "You will come with us. If your words are true, we may both have reason to learn what happened here." Liana's men took Ethan's craft under escort while he rode beside the Queen's carriage. They followed a winding trail that led back toward the heart of her realm. The scenery turned from ruin to forest, and the mist gave way to bright morning. Birds sang from the trees. Ethan could not help glancing at the Queen now and then. Her calm presence struck him in a way he could not explain. There was a quiet strength in her posture, and in her eyes a light that seemed older than time. When she noticed him looking, she gave the faintest smile. Neither cold nor distant. It was enough to make him forget his fear for a moment. They reached the city by noon. Tall towers rose above the walls, built of white stone that shone in the sunlight. As the gates opened, people bowed to the passing carriage. Ethan looked in amazement, feeling as though he had stepped straight into one of the old stories he had read as a boy. Inside the palace, servants brought food and water for the traveler, and physicians came to check his injuries from the crash. When night fell, Liana returned to speak with him again. "You speak of energy, machines, and readings," she said thoughtfully. "Your world must run on reason, while mine depends on faith, yet both seem guided by the same light. Tell me, Ethan Cole, do you think the heaven sign was meant for you?" He paused, unable to answer. "I don't know, Your Majesty. But I feel that I was meant to find something here. Maybe someone." Liana studied him for a long moment, then smiled gently. "Perhaps fate writes in lines wider than we can see." The moon rose above the marble. Towers and somewhere deep within the palace walls, the faint glow from the strange storm returned for a moment like a promise whispered, between two beating hearts that had only just begun to find each other. Ethan woke up early in the palace guest chamber. The room was wide and bright with tall windows that opened toward gardens full of flowers. He had slept deeply for the first time since his crash, though the strange dreams of light and sound still lingered in his mind. He looked out through the window and saw the city come alive. People filled the streets, merchants opened their shops, and small children ran with laughter echoing through the square. For a moment he forgot he was in another kingdom, far from the world he knew. When he stepped outside, a young servant named Clara led him through long marble halls filled with paintings and carvings. The palace was old, but full of life, every corner glowing softly with sunlight. Clara told him that Queen Lyanna had asked to see him after breakfast. Ethan felt both nervous and curious. He had met her only once, but her voice had stayed in his heart like a song he could not turn off. As he entered the royal garden, he saw Lyanna sitting beside a small pond. She wore a plain gown of pale green, her hair tied simply, her crown resting on a stone table nearby. For a queen, she seemed almost like one of her people rather than above them. Birds hopped between the flower branches, and the sound of falling water gave peace to the whole place. Lyanna looked up when he approached. "Good morning, Ethan. Did you rest well?" "Yes, Your Majesty," he said, bowing slightly. "The kindness of your people is more than I could expect." She smiled softly. "Here I am not only a queen. Here I am only Lyanna. Sit with me." He hesitated for a moment, but then sat down across from her. The gentle wind moved through the trees as she offered him a cup of warm tea. "I asked you here because I want to understand your world," she said. "You speak of machines and energy, of ways to read the pulse of the earth. Tell me, how do your people live with such power?" Ethan thought for a while before answering. "We try to use our knowledge to make life easier. We build homes, travel fast, and even touch the edge of the stars. But sometimes, I think we forget the meaning of peace and wonder. We move so fast that we stop listening to the world around us." Lyanna nodded slowly. "In my land, we live through tradition. We trust the voice of the river, the breath of the mountains, and the wisdom of old stories. But maybe we listened so much to the past that we stopped dreaming of the future." Both sat in quiet thought for a while. The queen reached toward the pond and let her fingers touch the water. "Perhaps your knowledge and my faith are not so different," she said. "Perhaps they are two sides of the same thread." Ethan felt a strange warmth in his chest. Her words made sense to him, in a way no map or formula ever had. "Maybe that is what the light meant," he said. "To bring two worlds together." Later that day, Lyanna called her council to meet in the main hall. Ethan stood beside her as she spoke to her nobles. Many looked uneasy at his presence. He was still a stranger, and some saw him as a danger to their queen. One of them, Lord Brent, stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, this man is not of our realm. His tools are unknown, his words untested. We cannot trust what he brings." Lyanna answered calmly, "You fear what you do not understand. But he may hold knowledge that could heal the land. The strange lights are no longer only a story. They touch our skies, and his arrival happened at the same moment." The council murmured among themselves. Finally, Lyanna ended the meeting with quiet authority. "Ethan will remain as my guest. Together we will study the paths of the light and find what truth it holds." After the hall emptied, Ethan turned to her. "I hope I do not cause you trouble," she smiled faintly. "Change always brings fear before it brings understanding. Remind them that the world can still surprise us." That evening, she took him to the old workshop under the palace. Their ancient tools stood beside golden scrolls that glowed with faded runes. She told him that these were once used by the first builders of her kingdom people, who mixed craft and knowledge to raise cities of light. He showed her how one of his devices could read the faint pulse in those runes. The walls began to hum softly, lighting up symbols that had slept for centuries. Lyanna's eyes widened. "They live," she whispered. Ethan smiled. They were waiting. As the glow washed over them, time seemed to pause. The air itself shimmered with warmth, and the queen looked at him in wonder. "Perhaps you are the answer the light sent," she said. He shook his head gently. "No, Your Majesty. Maybe we are both the answer." Night fell quietly around the palace. The sky outside shimmered with small sparks of gold. Not the violent storm of the first night, but a peaceful dance of slow-moving light. From the tower balcony, Lyanna and Ethan stood side by side watching it. Neither spoke. They did not need to. In the silence, something new had begun to grow: trust, curiosity, and a hope that neither science nor royalty alone could create. For the first time, the distance between their worlds began to fade, replaced by something far stronger than fear. The next morning began with a heavy silence across the land. Clouds gathered above the palace, dark and thick, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. From the tower window, Ethan watched the shadow fill the streets below. He felt something deep inside his chest, a quiet warning he could not explain. Since his discovery with Queen Liana in the old workshop, he had worked day and night to learn more about the strange light that connected their worlds. But now, the glow that once felt calm began to change, shifting into brighter flashes that rolled across the sky. Queen Liana stood beside him. Her face looked calm, yet her eyes showed worry. "The light is stronger than before," she said softly. "It is not peaceful anymore." Ethan turned to her. "I think the energy we found may be reacting to something around it. We woke it up, but we do not yet know how to control it." Liana nodded and called for her guards. They hurried into the room and bowed before her. "Send word to the council," she commanded. "They must gather in the main hall. We may face danger if this grows worse." Ethan followed her down to the great hall, where nobles and soldiers waited. Their voices were tense and uncertain as they looked toward the windows where the light flashed outside like silent thunder. Lord Brent stepped forward again. "Your Majesty, we warned you this man brings risk. Now see what his arrival has caused." Liana's voice was steady but cold. "Enough. He is not the cause. He is the one helping us understand it. Do not fear what can still be guided." The hall grew quiet. He turned to Ethan. "What can we do?" Ethan looked at his notes and the small device he carried. "If we can build a stabilizer from the same material in your workshop, we might calm the energy." "Okay, but we must finish it before the light reaches the palace walls." Without delay, the queen agreed. She ordered the finest smiths and builders to assist him. Together they returned to the underground chamber filled with ancient tools. The air there buzzed faintly with energy, like the pulse of a sleeping heart. Ethan drew plans on paper, showing how they could create a circle of power strong enough to contain the surge. The builders worked fast, melting metal and fitting wires together as sparks filled the air. Liana stayed by Ethan's side, passing him instruments, steadying his hands when the vibrations shook the floor. Even in fear, they found calm in each other's presence. Outside, the city began to shake. The sky deepened to a dark violet, the same color from the first night. Lightning without sound danced between the clouds. People cried out as the air rippled with bursts of light. Some shouted that the end had come, while others prayed to the heavens for mercy. In the midst of the storm, a sudden explosion tore through the lower walls of the palace. Shouts echoed through the halls. Ethan ran to the courtyard and saw flames rising near the gates. A group of rebels had broken through, taking advantage of the panic. They believed the storm was punishment for the queen's actions and wanted to overthrow her rule. Guards met them with swords and shields, and chaos filled the streets. Liana rushed to protect her people, standing firm in front of her soldiers. "Defend the city," she commanded. "No harm shall come to the innocent." Ethan's mind raced. He knew if the stabilizer was not activated soon, the energy would swallow everything, both the rebels and the loyal alike. He looked back toward the chamber where the unfinished device waited. He called out to the queen, "We must complete it now. If we fail, there will be no kingdom left to fight for." Liana turned from the battle and met his eyes. For a moment, time stood still between them. She nodded and followed him back inside, leaving Captain Rowan to lead the defense. Together, they reached the chamber again. The air trembled, and the symbols on the walls glowed with fierce light. Ethan connected the final line of metal and looked toward Liana. "It needs a power source strong enough to hold the whole wave," he said. "The only power great enough is the one inside me," she answered quietly. "The royal line carries the bond to the old energy. I can link with it." His face turned pale. "If you do that, it might destroy you." Her eyes were firm and shining. "If I do not, it will destroy everyone." Ethan looked at her, torn between fear and love he could no longer hide. "Then I'll do it with you," he said. "We started this together. We will finish it together." She tried to speak, but emotion caught in her throat. He stepped closer, placed his hand over hers on the crystal core, and gave a small nod. "Trust me." The storm above roared louder. The floor glowed beneath their feet. They both stood in the circle, joined hands, and the light surrounded them. A stream of energy poured through the device, lifting their hair and shaking the ground. Outside, people looked up as the whole sky turned white. Then, silence. The clouds broke. The wind softened. The city lights glowed warm again. Guards and rebels alike stood frozen as the storm faded into a calm, golden brightness. When the light disappeared, Ethan and Liana collapsed beside the stabilizer, still breathing. The chambers shone gently around them, as if the world itself gave thanks. Far above, the first morning rays broke through the clearing sky. The danger had passed, but their journey was not finished. Something new began to stir between them: hope, courage, and the growing truth that fate had joined their lives for a reason no storm could ever erase. The sun rose slowly over the city, touching the towers and rooftops with gentle light. The air was calm and sweet after days of fear. People stepped out into the streets and looked toward the palace, still half afraid that the storm might return. But the sky stayed clear, soft, and endless. Birds flew again above the gardens, and the sound of bells rang through the city, carrying hope instead of warning. In the royal palace, Queen Liana opened her eyes. She was lying on a couch, wrapped in white cloth. Her body felt weak but alive. For a moment, she did not remember where she was or what had happened. Then, like a dream returning, she saw the bright storm, the circle of light, and Ethan's hand in hers. She turned her head and found him sitting beside her, his face pale and tired but smiling. "You're awake," he said softly. "You gave me quite a fright." Liana smiled faintly. "And you gave your queen quite a scare as well. Are you hurt?" "Not enough to complain," he said with a small laugh. "The stabilizer worked. The skies are calm again." She slowly sat up. Her limbs trembled, but she felt a strange peace inside her heart. "We did it," she whispered. You and I, for a long moment, they sat in silence. The window beside them showed warm sunlight spilling over the gardens. It was hard to believe that the same place had been filled with fire and shouts only a day before. Later, the council gathered in the hall again. This time there were no angry voices, no fear or doubt. Lord Brent bowed deeply before the Queen. "Your Majesty," he said, "we misjudged the stranger. He has saved us all. The city owes its life to his courage and to yours." Liana looked at Ethan, who stood at her side, uncomfortable with the attention. She smiled gently. "Then let the record show," she said, "that courage belongs to no single land, to all people who hold hope." Cheers echoed through the hall, and the people of the city celebrated for days. The streets filled with music, flowers, and laughter. For the first time in many years, there was not only peace, but unity. The storm that had frightened everyone had brought them together instead of apart. Each evening, Ethan and Liana met in the same garden where they had once spoken about science and faith. They walked slowly along the pond, speaking about the future. Liana asked him how his world might use the knowledge they found. Ethan explained how the stabilizer could help build bridges of energy, connecting distant towns and lighting dark places without fear of ruin. She listened with wonder, and in return told him the old stories of her land, the legends of kings who listened to the wind and queens who spoke with rivers. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between them deepened. Ethan had begun to feel that this kingdom had become his home, yet part of him wondered what would come next. He had lived a life of reason, of machines and order. Before meeting Liana, now he had learned that reason alone was not enough to give meaning. Sometimes the heart wrote a clearer truth than any calculation. One evening, as the festival lights glowed across the city, Liana stood on the royal balcony, looking out over her people. Ethan joined her quietly. The sound of celebration rose from below. Lanterns floated into the air, drifting upward like tiny stars. Liana turned toward him. Her eyes held a softness that words could not name. "This peace will last," she said. "The world feels new again." Ethan nodded. "Sometimes, to rebuild, the world needs to be shaken first." She looked down at the square where children danced. Then she spoke in a voice gentle but clear. "Ethan, tell me honestly, when the skies broke and everything could have ended, what did you think of most?" He smiled, remembering that moment in the blinding light. "I thought," he said slowly, "that I did not want to leave you." She studied him, and for a long second neither spoke. The air between them seemed to hum softly, like the energy that had joined them before. Then Liana's expression changed to the faintest smile, filled with trembling warmth. "Do you wish me as your wife, human?" she asked in the same steady tone she used for royal commands, yet it carried something tender beneath it. Ethan looked into her eyes and felt every answer he had ever sought find its place. "Yes," he said simply. The bells began to ring again, this time not in warning, but in joy.
Oh.
The people below looked up and cheered as word spread from the palace that their queen had chosen.
Oh.
The days that followed were filled with celebration. Garlands of white flowers hung along the palace gates, and the whole city shimmered in gold. On the day of the ceremony, the air was warm and bright. Liana walked through the garden toward the great hall, her crown shining, her smile calm and sure. Ethan waited at the far end, dressed in the robes given to him by the council. When she reached him, time seemed to pause again, just as it had on the day they met in the valley. After the vows were spoken, the crowd cheered, and the sound of joy spread beyond the castle walls. It was said that night the sky glowed once more, but this time the light was soft and kind, a gift, not a threat. Some called it the sky's blessing. From that day forward, Queen Liana and Ethan ruled together, guiding both knowledge and faith, teaching the people that heart and mind were strongest when joined. They often walked hand in hand through the quiet gardens at dusk, speaking softly of dreams they would build. And when the night sky shone with gentle violet lights above Avalon and Arenthia, the people smiled and told their children that the heavens were simply remembering the day a queen and a human chose love over fear. The light no longer warned of danger. It was a promise that two hearts, once divided by worlds, had become one forever.